If we are interested in creating a creative business around our art, around our writing, around our poetry, there is an aspect I think that we need to be considering. Anytime you start a business, you really need to be thinking about, and that aspect is trust. How much does the person we are communicating with, potential client, potential person that wants to go deeper with us. They see what we're offering and they're like, okay, this might be something I'm interested in, but I don't know yet if I'm ready to pull the trigger. And there's lots of parts of the process to make that easier. But one of the first things that I think is helpful to consider is trust. Does the person believe that you can help them achieve the thing that they're interested in achieving? Good morning, guys. Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome to your weekly poetry business podcast, Arts and Offers. We are here to enter that conversation about, hey, if I want to take poetry, if I want to take writing, and I want to make something serious around it, I want it to be the thing that sustains me. How do I make it happen? We're detailing the process of how we're making it happen for us. And so maybe you can follow our breadcrumbs. Maybe it'll be something helpful for you. And if you have your own insights, feel free to share them with us as well. To guide you in this process, there is me. Hello, guys. My name is Jeff. Our co-host, Matthias, is on his way. Had some traffic, but he should be here shortly. There's some interesting numbers that I think are helpful when we're thinking about the people we want to work with. If you guys have ever looked up numbers that are called Dunbar's numbers, this was research done by Dunbar. There's also research done by Google, kind of talking about what does it take for someone to really want to dig with us deeper, to start really feeling like they have a connection with us. And some of the things that they've found is, for instance, 7 interactions with us across 4 different settings. These are some things we want to be really thinking about before people really start considering us as different from people that they don't know. So what do different settings look like? Like, hey, if people see you on a website, they see you on a social media post, they meet you in person, and then they also get an email from you. Those could be like 4 different touch points. 7 interactions could be they see, 7 different videos, or maybe they look at a couple posts you make, they meet you in person, and then they also, again, get a written communication. Like the more interactions we can have with people on different levels, that's kind of the first thing we can think about if we're trying to deepen our connection with people, because a lot of this is about relationships. A lot of times, if there's 2 people offering a service that is more or less identical, the choice that people are going to make oftentimes falls on vibe, feeling, emotional relationship. And so we want to foster that as much as we can. I think when we're approaching relationships with people, we want to be thinking about, it's not just about taking, it's about how can I give something that the other person really feels like, oh wow, this really benefits me. That's really the thing we want to be thinking about with the services we create. Some other big parts of the trust component, I think, come down to a concept known as social proof. People want to know that you've done the thing that they're looking for. Right. So I think in the writing community, what does social proof often look like? Social proof looks like if you've been accepted into retreats. So for instance, from our perspective, being accepted into fellowships like Kalu, being accepted into fellowships, retreat programs like Kave Kanam. This can be publications. What are the journals where you're appearing in? I think this is a big part of why people submit, is because they're trying to build up the resume, so to speak. Speaking strictly about the poetry world, but I think you see it with artists as well, where it's like, okay, I need to get work into galleries, or photography. Matthias can talk to this. He has some photographs that recently made it into like Vogue and things like that. So thinking about the places where people can not only locate your work, but then you can also include it. We've talked before about if you work with an organization, again, using an example from Matthias. So Matthias has done some videography work that was seen by, companies like PBS, like broadcasting networks. And so they're saying, hey, like we're making a larger production. We want to use a snippet of what you've produced in a larger series or as part of a larger show. Well, now you can put that, as credit on your resume. You may often see like on people's websites, sometimes you could see like logos of the companies that different people have worked with. It's like if you have opportunities like that, like if you've been a part of a festival, if you were invited to speak at a conference, if you've given a talk, if you've done workshops with larger organizations, including that sort of information, on websites, social media posts, things like that, it just immediately lets people see what you're doing. One of the things that we're doing with the Verses this month, for actually the next 2 weeks, by the way, happy Poetry Month. We're here. Welcome to April. So one of the things we're doing is we are launching a case study, which we can talk about with this guy when he comes in. Hi. Oh, look at the green. Look at you. How are you, man?
I am swell. How are you, man?
Not too bad. Not too bad. You came at a great moment. Okay. We're about to talk about a larger topic. So while Matthias gets settled, just to kind of recap, we're talking about
the beanstalk again?
We're not talking about the beanstalk.
I think we should invest in the beans, but he's like...
We're talking about trust and building trust with people that are thinking about engaging with us, taking part in our services and our offers and things like that. One of the things I mentioned for you, because I'm rude and talk for people, I was mentioning how, for instance, with your photography, you got pieces put into Vogue, with your videography. I was just pretty much just like glowing you up for the last like 10 minutes.
I'll give you that $5 later.
With the videography, like when you were shooting like the things for Ajane and like PBS, I was like, hey, we want to take a portion of this, and then you can now mention like PBS on like your social media pages and other platforms.
I actually had a thing about this a little bit earlier, but we'll talk about it.
We can talk about it.
No, it's like
okay.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
It's good though.
It's
good.
Okay. So, social proof. Yeah. Right. I was talking about for me, like attending workshops like Kawe Kanam, Kaolu, getting publications in journals that you view as like prestigious. Submitting competitions, like having like a collection, like one of my collections. This is the collection I kept getting. I was like rejected like 2 times, like Tiana Clark in like a 3-month span. But like for like the Frost Place and things like that, and like the boat, like Chapbook Prize and things like that. So like all these things that you can point to, like, hey, not only am I telling you about the thing, I've done the thing, so that way people can be like, okay, I can trust this. There's another project I'm about to get started on, but before I mention that, I wanted to see if you had other things to kind of add just from like the social proof component for trust.
Yeah, well, I think, and this might be, it's not petty, but it actually means a lot to people for them to be able to see that other people have, engaged with your work or engaged with like you as a personality, and there's been like good outcome from it. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything like as necessarily as large as like like getting into like in like an anthology or like getting into like Kawe Kanam or like a magazine or anything like that. A lot of it could just be I guess maybe it can even come down to like kind of maybe like simple like word of mouth interactions like on social media and things like that. But yeah, having that kind of like social proof where people can see your work, and by your work it could be like the work of you as a personality or the work of you as like the artist and creative in the space. Once they can see that out in the world, they tend to be able to engage with it with a little bit more like reference. I even after the Vogue thing, it was actually like really interesting. Like after the Vogue thing, like I posted it that morning and I was like super excited with it, and I was like really like, but then like I let the post like kind of go, and then like in my inbox there was like 400 like little like 400 like just people like, oh, like really dope, like I would love to work with you, I would love to, and Wow. It's like but to be clear, it's like most of those are people that are like trying to engage with your work on the same basis that you might with like creatives that you trust, you know what I mean? So they're like, oh, I want to do something for free. I want you to do something on my idea or anything like that. So most of that is like, I mean, it's not necessarily noise because it is good. You know what I mean? Like that is a net, that is positive that people are seeing your work and they wanting to engage with your work. But it's just to say that like once people see, again, an establishment, and that's not to say that it makes or breaks you as a creative, but it's just to say that like having that, you know, small thing like that social proof is really helpful. That's actually the reason why, like, okay, we have a friend, JG. JG, if you're watching this, I'm talking to you. We have a friend, JG, and he actually has an Emmy. So shout out to that. And if you're hearing that from the first time from me, that's the problem. Because if you have an Emmy, you should be saying that a lot of times. That should be on a shirt. It should be, or whatever. But it's just to say like, but yeah, that's like the highest. That is an incredibly high social proof that hey, my work does this in this space, or what I can effectively do this in this space.
So I think a challenge that can come up is sometimes we are creating something and we're like, okay, but what if I don't necessarily have that? And I think there's a couple different options. One option is bringing in someone who does and then kind of partnering with them. You see that a lot. Like, for instance, if you're organizing a conference, it's your first conference. So what do you do about it? You bring in like a big name as like a draw, you know, and that can look, it lends credibility in the eyes of people because they're like, oh, you were able to bring in this talent. They don't necessarily think about how much you may have paid that talent to be there and things like that. It's kind of the same thing with like sports. You know, you win a championship. It doesn't matter if the other team was like injured and, you know, in like body bags. Like, you won the championship.
You got a chip.
You know,
5 years from now, you'll be able to like, I have a championship.
Like, not to call out like the team I think about that is like Toronto when they won.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, no, it's just,
good job.
Just so
like, you got the chip. Good job.
Kevin Durant.
But you know, in the record book, it goes down as a championship. You got it.
That's
no one
true.
cares. You know, so it's these are the things we want to be considering. So that's kind of the first thing I would say is, you know, it may be if you're trying to do a thing, but you feel like you don't have that proof, bringing in someone that people believe does.
I also think it's, you know, also what is really important to make sure that you, like having somebody engage with your work and on any level, like especially if they're like large or famous or have kind of like that's rarely like a net negative. Depends on like the kind of like who they are, but it's also like having the social proof from somebody that's in their field, that's in your field or in connection with like your field is always best. You know, it's like I'm a photographer. But if somebody that has no connection to the photographer world whatsoever, if they were to engage my work, it would be as a subject. You know what I mean? So if they say I'm a good photographer, then that helps, you know, me in that that kind of messaging. But if somebody like from like the poetry, like if somebody doesn't know I do poetry whatsoever, and they're just like, oh, he's he's a photographer and he's like, I do like photography stuff with him, but like he's also a great poet. Like, it maybe doesn't mean as much because they can't really speak to my work as like as a poet necessarily. Okay, not to make this political, but it was just so funny. Like even like talking about this, Beyonce.
Oh wow! So, be careful, please.
I'm not gonna say, but it's just to say that I think that it's like, so like Beyonce is somebody who is a very like one of the largest artists, arguably the largest artist of our time. You know what I mean? And it's really interesting because I'm like leveling kind of credence to like in the political space doesn't necessarily like, because you don't really. You're getting music, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're getting music and you're getting visuals, and that's all like really, really good and really, really positive. And Beyonce is, don't attack us, Beyonce fans. Only Jeff doesn't like you. I love you.
That's because he's married. That's
But yeah, no, just to say that, yeah, like, and that's just one example. There's like a ton of other examples, like from other like spaces, but that's like kind of the biggest one that I can really think of, because it's like there's some people that are gonna really love that a lot, but then
I think it's
what kind of shift does it make?
It's interesting you bring that. So, I would say like a similar artist, like thinking like Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift enters the relationship with, like,
We're just getting everywhere.
no hate at all. just like looking at the phenomenon. So Taylor Swift, gets involved with Travis Kelce, and then suddenly you bring in a lot of people to that.
Yeah.
So I think a component of this is also, I don't want to say the quality of the people you bring in, but almost like the devotedness of the people you bring in. So so Travis Kelce, I mean, so by, Taylor and Travis being together, that brings in new people to the NFL. People buying jerseys and stuff like that.
Yeah.
How devoted are those people actually to the NFL? Like, I feel like there's almost like a level, there's different tiers of people that are supporting you. And some people are only just there for like one aspect of it. And as soon as that one aspect goes missing, they're gone.
Yeah.
They're not really there for. You see this a lot with YouTube. If you're a YouTube channel that does a lot of like how-to stuff, like we talked about this example before, like if I'm trying to find information, my toilet's clogged, I need to fix the toilet, I just need that how-to. I don't really care who it is. I just need to fix it. And as soon as that's done, I'm probably not going to look at that channel again. So I'm not really invested in the person. And so if I'm that channel, the question for me becomes, do I want to stick with people like that? Or do I want to really target people that want to go deeper? And I think if from our perspective of like, creating like a creative business around our art, I think, we could bring in The Rock, or bring in, big name people.
We can bring in The Rock.
I'll call Dwayne. But that might not necessarily be the type of people that we want. You see a lot with like short form content. You get in front of way more people and you get a lot more views, but trying to get people from short form over to long form is super difficult. Trying to get people that watch like a 10-second clip of you versus, think about for your own experience. Like if you guys watch shorts or you watch reels, how often have you actually clicked the profile of the person who made the reel? What's the ratio? My guess is it's probably not every single one you see. Maybe 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 20. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
And so that sort of deeper connection, I think, is going to be something that for our business, that's the connection, at least from a diversist perspective, that I'm much more interested in, which is harder because it takes more time. We talked again at the beginning about Dunbar's numbers for like social interactions, where it's like you need like 7 interactions across 4 different settings to really start working on that relationship and making people feel closer to you, which is hard because you got to get them coming back 7 times. You got to get them to 4 different settings, and that takes a lot of effort. You hear a lot of like with like newsletters and things like that, like when people make a buying decision, when they actually buy something, a lot of times they don't buy the first time they see you. They might, I've had clients who haven't, signed up for an actual class with me until they had already watched like 200 videos and, seen me like 400 times before, and this is over the span of like 5 months, a year and a half, So, which also speaks to a different argument where that means you also have to have enough things for them to encounter you that frequently.
Yeah, you gotta embed a need. You know what I'm saying? When people like, I even think about like tires on a car, right? If you're watching a tire commercial, it's more than likely you don't need a tire right now, right? But because you're going to continue to drive and you're going to continue to like operate your vehicle, the more that you hear that commercial, it's also worked like, because linear time, eventually you're going to need tires. And then by the time you need tires, it's like, oh, the thing that's on your mind is this commercial that I keep hearing in my head. There's like, there's like roofers, like same exact thing. Like they're not marketing to you because because buying a roof is an impulse buy. They're marketing to you because hopefully by the time that you need a roof, you already know their
Yeah,
jingle.
over the next like 10 years,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, you know. And I think that's the other thing with like why people create newsletters. It's slightly getting into a different topic now. I'll review us back in a moment. But like newsletters are important not because people are necessarily going to read your newsletter. It's because they see you at the top of their inbox, even if they don't open it. Most newsletters I get in my email I don't open, but I see the person's name.
Thanks, Jeff.
Let's just being honest. But I don't think I'm alone. I don't think I'm alone in that. But it's just seeing that person's name over and over again.
Yeah.
But to go back to the idea of like, okay, so you're doing something that maybe you're like, I don't have the social proof for, or enough of it. What do I need to do? So one thing we said again, like partnering with someone that maybe does. Another thing that you can do is the last episode we did at Arts and Offers, we talked about leveraging free or using free. So doing the type of work that you're interested in without a charge. So then at the end of it, for instance, asking for a referral, be like, hey, so we just had this experience, you did a product, could you leave a review, leave a testimonial, leave a referral, something like that, so that other people know about it. So that's another way to kind of start getting some expertise in the area that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Something that we're doing with the Verses is for the next 2 weeks, I'm working with 2 poets on chapbook projects. And we're going to be having like details about the process along on the channel, so you can kind of follow along on the journey. So like if you have your own project and you're like, I don't know, I want to get this started, but I don't know how. So you can kind of like watch us kind of go through the mapping process, the production process, the promotion process. You can kind of like apply it to yourself, So we're doing this for 2 weeks. It's just like 20-minute chats once a day, daily for 2 weeks. And then showing you guys. So this is where, again, having a platform, for instance, like a YouTube or like a social media, and then like kind of detailing it so then people can follow along and see what's up. So then later on, if they want to do their own thing with you, maybe a vastly different project, but at least they have an idea like your process. That's something that can give them a bit of trust, because you can literally point to like, hey guys, I want to do this with you. I just did this project with these guys. So now you can see if you like it, and if you don't like it, cool. If you do like it, we can work together, things like that.
Yeah. Social proof also, I think, lends to like a like kind of accessibility with your work and kind of like with your platform. Just like what you're talking about, like somebody else like kind of like making a like hey, leave a comment here on like on Google, or like just posting about your experience or something like that. Because somebody again I guess that is what social proof is, right? But it's like somebody else, that is experiencing kind of the same hiccup that person is. Now that they see that they have a resolution that came through you, they have to, as opposed to Diversus being this platform that like, man, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through. I don't know if I'm going to like it's just going to be too much on this person's plate. It's like I can see somebody that's been benefited from this, and now they can kind of move forward with their own process.
Yeah. And I think that, let's say you're in an area where you're like a complete beginner in something, a lot of times people don't necessarily see the value in that. They're like, I'm a beginner. What would someone want to learn from me? What do I have to offer? Well, there's actually a lot of valuable knowledge that comes with that beginner perspective, because you're probably asking the questions or discovering the things that experts forgot about, because they've just been, it's the burden of knowledge. Like you forgot people don't know that. So you can actually use that to your advantage, because you can speak to other beginners. So like, for instance, maybe you've only taken like, I'm thinking like carpentry. Maybe you've only done like a little bit of carpentry, maybe like a semester's worth. So you're not a master, but you do remember like, oh yeah, these are things that I've learned, in the last 8 weeks or something like that would have really helped me out 8 weeks ago. Yeah. People really connect with that approach. There's a YouTube channel about like a guy who like positions himself as a dad, and he's just like teaching people how to do like basic life skills. And he's not necessarily like an expert, and he's like, oh, this is how you fix your plumbing in your sink. This is how you tie your shoes. This is how you tie a tie. Like he just like goes through kind of like daily life stuff that we don't necessarily all have to be experts in, but that sort of kind of more casual approach really speaks to people because, someone that's like super polished might actually be discouraging. Like, oh, this is too high level. I can't do this. There's almost this. The effective filter is really high. Like there's this barrier where it's like, this is a whole other level I'm not at, so I'm not even going to do it. Whereas like learning to draw from like someone that just learned, hey, I learned how to draw. This is my first face. Here's things I learned from drawing my first face or my 10th face, my 20th face versus like my 1000th face. Because I don't know, I see a lot of like, I don't even know why I see this now, but like I on my Facebook feed, like I'm getting like these like drawing things, and like there's some people like super complicated in terms of like the diagrams that they show, like, oh, you have to do this shape, this shape, this shape, versus some people are like, hey, here's 3 steps. Approaching from a very much a beginner kind of aspect.
Yeah, I think, and kind of to your point, I was actually just watching a video about something similar, but it was it was talking about like on location shoots for like short films and stuff like that. But he was like at the beginning of it, he was just talking about like one of the hardest things about kind of communicating or like taking in communication about like some of the hardware that you're going to be using on a shoot is that a lot of the people that are explaining it have been doing this for a decade plus. Yeah. And so they're explaining something to people that are just now starting out, but they don't really realize like they're at a really high level starting out with their explanation. And the analogy that he used was something about like the reason why it's hard to teach people how to ride a bike, especially when you're older, is because what a lot of people forget is that you need momentum in order to be able to ride a bike. And a lot of times people are like here and they're like, I feel like that's actually substantially hard. It's substantially harder to stay balanced on a bike. That's still like that. It's substantially harder. And so, but it's like, because that's a barrier that a lot of like, they're forgetting to explain that you actually have to be moving, because it's like to them, of course you have to be moving. Like you have to push off in order to kind of get things going. Like a lot of people kind of like miss that. And so it's a lot harder for them to kind of get into that groove. So yeah, it's just like, it's really the amount of not only information that you have, but it's also like, somebody is just now learning how to ride a bike. They're probably going to come across that and be able to, they're going to have that much more readily in their experience than somebody who's like, I've known how to ride a bike since I was a kid. So in my head, it doesn't even compute that I have to, push off. Yeah. But I thought it was really cool. But it was also just talking about like, somebody producing a short film. What do you need? What instruments do you need? What lighting do you need? But it's like all of that would be very overwhelming. Like even like myself as like a relative beginner compared to a lot of other people, right? And like if I turn on a video, if they're starting with something like super high level, maybe I can get there. Maybe I can start registering. But like if this was me 3 years ago, I'm completely lost.
I think another aspect of this as well is just kind of like the research phase in terms of knowing the person that you're trying to reach out to. Like, is the person you're communicating with, are they looking for something that's more professional or more casual? Like one of the things, if we were thinking about, if I was helping someone with a YouTube channel right now, one of the things we'd want to be looking at is for the channel that they want to create and become known for and like establishing trust in, are the people looking for hyper polished videos, which were really popular, especially like last year, 2-3 years ago, with like ultra editing and things like that, lots of cuts, versus now you're seeing a push more towards less polish and more just kind of less editing, letting cameras run, leaving the breaths in, leaving the mistakes in a little bit. And so from a production standpoint, things are a lot easier from that standpoint. But I think that some people, though, are still looking for the polished content. They're looking for the clean, sterile background. Some people, though, are looking for the more chaotic. Like, it's all about the vibe, because if I'm going for someone casual, maybe they want to see my house. Maybe they want to, and not only do they want to see my house, they want to see like some stuff on my table, and things like that. Whereas some
Yeah.
people may want to see like the corporate background, the green plant against the white wall, and things like that. So it's like also the more you understand the person that you're reaching out to, the more you can kind of create the content that they're expecting, which can also show that, hey, I've done this attention, so I know what you want, and that attention to detail can also help the person you're reaching out to feel more comfortable with you and trust you more on what you're about to deliver them.
Yeah. And like from your perspective, do you feel like you are doing more like hunting for that type of person, or are you letting like kind of metrics decide like what kind of person you're trying to appeal to?
That's a really that's a great question. So like for instance, I can speak to like the diverses like videos. Like I think a lot of times when you look at art, if you think art channel, I'm thinking like paintings, museums. Let's just kind of like talk through it really quick. And I haven't done any research on this, so I can't speak to it. I can just speak to what I've just seen from art channels in general, and not that many. What kind of music do you think they're playing?
Classical.
Classical music. Okay. What do you think about color palette?
For an art channel.
Especially like think like a museum art kind of channel.
Thinking like oil-based, almost some earth tones. I could see some really lightly saturated blues.
Okay, it's like almost like pastel colors,
Yeah.
light colors, nothing heavily saturated. You're not seeing like even like that. The verses like red might be a little too red, and things like that, right?
Right.
And so that's something that you kind of want to think about. So like if you're starting an art channel, you might be thinking about, oh, do I want the rap music or do I want the class? And maybe you do want the rap, because maybe what kind of art channel are you creating?
Yeah.
But people have, we've talked in the past about systems. People have expectations. People have an expectation that, oh, art, museum, high class. What do I associate with high class? I might associate formal wear like button down. I might associate white shirt, maybe blazer. I might associate those like kind of light pastel colors, if not just white and black. Very
Yeah.
kind of conservative choices in that regard. So if I create an art channel that, I'm wearing a t-shirt that has holes in it, I got a pizza stain on it, my wall is like, who knows, it has like a fantasy like unicorn on the background and things like that.
Yeah.
People may not be, again, talking about trust, people might not trust that art channel as much if they're looking for what the other kind of art channels are traditionally doing. Now you can push against that and be like, no, we're intentionally doing all this, and I hope people see that and you're trying to attract that. But this is where knowing your audience is. So like for instance with the verses, I'm trying to approach it from a more contemporary lens, like professional but also modern. And so like I had to make a choice, be like, okay, like for the music choice, like we have little bits of music and things like that. We could have gone the classical route. Maybe one day we will, but like right now it's not. I'm looking for something with a little bit of bass, a little bit of drum, but not overpowering, just enough to kind of
Yeah.
touch the energy level. But that's kind of the vibe we create. I mean, look at like the setting we have now. We got the backdrop, we got the books, but also the brick wall. We could have shot this in a lot more sterile. Not that this has like a ton going on, but there's a little bit more going on than what you see some, I think, art. This could have been like a white studio, with like the black frame windows and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a definite aesthetic, and it's also like really cool because it's like naturally a space that's like it's yours, right? So it's like there's an aesthetic that you're able to carry through with some like real tangible consistency from both the online experience to naturally the real world
I mean, even
experience.
curves, like wearing like a baseball hat versus like a fedora versus not anything at all. A hoodie versus a blazer. Everything about the presentation, I think in general, we want to kind of be thinking about congruence towards what is the image we're trying to convey to people. And I think this also speaks to trust as well, because if you say you're doing one thing but you look like you're doing something else, that is going to create doubt. And it's going to be harder for people to see what, to make them willing to want to work with you. So everything needs to kind of line up. Like if I'm trying to appeal to like people who are going more counterculture, then I can't look too much against like the culture they're trying to push back against. You know what I mean? Like it's like everything's about image. Like essentially, did you see that something I've seen on my social media feed recently is about Tupac with Madonna? And I cannot speak to the veracity of it. Apparently they were together. I don't know much about.
I don't think I've heard something along those lines.
And so again, I can't speak to the veracity of it. But one thing Tupac was basically he wrote a letter to Madonna and be like, hey, we can't be together because this is going to speak against the image that I have for my audience, which. As a mixed person, there's a lot, but but I get
his brand is very much. It was very splintered away from I think it. I mean, I'm listening to Tupac's music and I'm thinking like, but Tupac is like dating Madonna. It does
so
change
there's some subverting that happens, and that's. I mean, there's a whole lot of larger narratives we can talk about that. But regardless, the central theme is that another way to establish trust is to think about what are the expectations the audience has about a product like this or an offer like this that I want to create. And am I matching that? And if I'm not matching that, intentionally not, then how am I defending those choices and making those choices and things like that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's real. I think there's it happens a lot of times with, when you're trying to get poets to kind of explain what they do as poets, you know what I mean? And it's not necessarily, Scott actually wrote something about this on Facebook, and it was something we talked about on one of our previous pods too. We were talking about some open mics. I think a lot of times people are they're trying to figure out the thing to do with your open mic. You know what I mean? What is the real... And a lot of people are going to open mics just because they want to express themselves. But then, again, there's a lot of people that are I'm trying to sharpen something that I have, or I'm trying to do something with poetry. And not to say that those two people can't be somewhat the same people. It's just to say that if you have a very targeted goal, and then maybe you should be able to talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing and what what your work is doing, what you're doing as a personality, and then again what your work is doing because of that. But again, you being able to define those things at least somewhat, if not concretely, will also help you to be able to really realize what are things that I could do that could mess up what I'm doing right now. What kind of image can I put out? Because again, even if it's something that you believe in, I even think about this a lot when it comes to your public image and what your work is doing on a public image. It's maybe you're I don't know, let's say you built an entire brand off of being an anime person, and you're man, all my work is based off of, all my poems are based off of anime, and that's all that I write about, that's everything I write about, that's it's all great. But then you start writing erotic poems about food or something like that. I don't know, who knows? But it's that, again, your audience is not expecting that. Your audience is not waiting for that, and your audience could be thrown off by that. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that you don't have any kind of creativity kind of in that field or in that realm, but it's just to say that maybe you shouldn't direct it, it shouldn't be on your anime poetry channel that you're trying to build. I hope that doesn't apply to anybody directly, because that was just really random. I'll do whatever I want to do.
Yeah. Probably start wrapping up soon, but I did kind of want to just recap some of the things we talked about. So again, in terms of techniques for establishing trust. Credentials, if you're doing a writing thing, so the publications, the MFA, the fellowships, the retreats, the connections you've made. if you don't have those things, then starting to develop those relationships, bringing in people that do, and incorporating them some way into whatever it is that you're creating. Another thing is trying to create like case studies, where again, potentially working with people for free on the project just to see like, is this viable? Is this something that could actually work? And then once it's done, letting people know about the results, asking them for referrals, asking them for testimonials about their experience. Other things that we want to consider too, audience awareness and seeing how much you match it, whether in terms of how you present everything. This even comes down to like colors, fonts, background, attire, the just general presentation. Another aspect of this as well is, something that we didn't touch on is sharing information in the space about the thing that you're interested in. So if you want to be known for writing, we'll start and do research on an aspect of writing that you're interested in, and then just sharing that. You don't even have to be the person that created it, but just become known as the person that shares it. Be like, oh yeah, you're the person that always talks about. We had a poet last night at the micro mic who's really big on like Japanese form and haiku. So like talking with her about haiku. She's written craft essays about haiku. She can point you to a lot of resources about haiku. So like just having that association that you're known for, because and this speaks to something you mentioned earlier. Like if you ask a lot of poets, like, oh, what makes your poetry different than other people's poetry? What's your unique? I love asking people this question. What's like your unique take on writing? People have a really hard time answering that. They have a really hard time answering that.
They have a really hard time being, they have a hard time answering that with with any realm of specificity.
They've never even thought about it.
Yeah, like
they've never even thought about it.
In their heads, a lot of poets, they're like, well, my poetry really talks about my emotions, and like, I'm just like a very big, like I'm like really in touch with my emotions. I'm like, that's like, okay, you've described 95% of poets.
If not more,
if not more. So like, we're really talking about like, kind of being able to like kind of drill it down. And actually, like, so last night was a really good example because so we're here, and the poet Jennifer, right? Yeah. Jennifer was doing the micro mic, but before the micro mic even started, I thought it was funny because like Jeff is kind of explaining to her kind of like how the event is going to kind of go, and then he's like explaining kind of like the interview process that he does. So it's she read poems, and then afterwards they do like a quick sit down. And it's so funny because it's like all of this stuff was so at the top of mind that she literally just started talking about it. Right
she could talk about it for like 2 hours.
I'm like that right there. Like that's how. And again, maybe it doesn't happen overnight, but that's dedication. That's somebody you could tell has spent years upon years upon years, very entrenched and locked into studying this and to making this like a very solid grounding in both her work, her everyday life. You know what I mean? And that way you can really expound upon it. You can do it on camera, you could do it with people in real time, and then eventually, people would be like, "Oh, yeah, you're the one who talks about haiku." It's like, you're that and person.
Even if she had never, and she has collections on haiku, but even if she didn't, she could still point you to, oh, well, this person says this person says this person says. It's like just by, pointing to what other people are doing in the space, just that awareness of the space also creates a sense of like, oh, you know what you're talking. That also creates trust. And it's interesting, I think, with writers, because this even happened last night, like, because originally I told her, like, is there any specific, basically before every talk, I try to ask the poet, like, is there a specific area that you want to be known for with your writing? And if I hadn't necessarily asked her that, I don't know if the discussion would have gone towards haiku. And in fact, there was a little bit of hesitation, too, because when I mentioned that question, she's like, oh, like, my brand, you know?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, and when people... creatives and artists think that in brand, like there's so much negativity, like you can hear in their voices and in the faces that they make, and she's that reaction. I only bring that up because I know that reaction isn't just her, that's a lot of people. Like when in reality, brand is what people think about us when we're not there. you know?
Yeah.
And I know that we just, it's always hard when you have a word or a concept that you introduce and you get just immediate negative reactions. Like, we may have talked about this before, but like when I say like a used car salesman, what do you think?
Kind of a weird, skeevy scammer.
Yeah, so like
Kind of.
so like it's the same thing when we say the word like brand or any marketing or business or money. I
Yeah.
say these words and it's just like the
Yeah.
automatic when it's like I haven't in our discussion I haven't labeled any of these associated. You're just coming into it, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think a lot of things come. They people are attaching a baggage to it that's attached to maybe a specific experience or a specific dynamic of experience. I was like, when you were talking about, I was like thinking about the word business, and I was thinking about like, the function of the business is not to be some kind of overlording, creativeless, space. Like, it's to be able to build and sustain something that is like, it requires people get something out of it. You know what I mean? Like, if I started a business today, the only way that it works is if there are voluntary transactions that are happening on the other end, like,
yeah,
between me and whoever it is that I'm transacting with. And like those like you're getting something, like it's not anybody that you've bought a book from, you know what I mean? Like, they've created something and nobody's forcing you to buy it, but because you're getting something out of it, like, you'll buy the book, and they're getting money out of it, and they're able to pay for their living, and then they're also able to have
yeah,
time and space to write more books. And so, like, that exchange is, not only is it important, but it's like, there is a negativity that's attached to it that, again, like when people
yeah.
like, ooh, brand, I'm like, yeah, like, but that is doing something for, not only for you, but also for it's able to guide you to the people that are going to be the most receptive to your work.
You know, which I think speaks to the verses, being in this space that is making this link between poetry and business. That's something, I mean, and this also speaks to our trust discussion today, is I have to be really careful about my wording, because if I word things in a way that gets that immediate negative reaction for people, then the door is automatically shut for anything else. People won't even listen,
Yeah.
So, and that goes for whatever sort of offer you want to create, is what's the language that people are looking for? What's also the language that's immediately going to turn people off? Because when you create posts, or you write, or you talk about what it is that you're creating, you need to know what words to include, but you also need to know what words to avoid.
For sure.
Yeah. Any other things that you think are salient for our argument today?
Not much. I think we kind of tackled everything.
So,
Yeah.
if you guys have other considerations, think about your own experience. The last time that you bought something, maybe you bought something this week, what was it, maybe even subconsciously, that now you're analyzing and you're like, oh, this is actually the reason why I bought. What's the motivation? Because the more you can understand the motivations of when you buy, I think the more you can understand the sort of motivations people are going to have when they want to buy from you. It's, if I get stuck in like a funnel or something like that, and I realize it, like, I try to pay attention, or like I do with YouTube a lot. Like, if I click on a video, before I press click, I try to understand, why am I clicking on this video? What is it about the title, or what is it about the thumbnail that made me click? Which I think, from a person who makes YouTube videos, these are important questions to have, because a lot of people are just clicking videos without really thinking about that. So I'll leave you with that. Let us know your own thoughts, guys. We'd love to hear them. Otherwise, we'll catch you next week on the next episode of Arts and Offers. Once more, my name is Jeff.
Matthias.
Thank you for being here, man. Thank you guys for being here as well. We will see you all later. I hope you guys have a good day. Hope you have a good night, and I hope you have a good